Hey everyone, it's Naomi. Today I am filming my December reading wrap-up video and just talking a little bit about my Goodreads goal for 2016 and perhaps for 2017. I wanted to read 40 books this year. That's what I set at the beginning of 2016 on Goodreads. And then I was like, oh, I can do better than that. I'll set it to 45. And then there was a couple of months where I barely did any reading and I didn't think I was going to make the 45, but as of today, it is New Year's Eve. I have read 44 books and I'm about to finish the 45th. So I can't believe that I'm actually going to make my Goodreads goal, but I think for next year I'm going to set the bar a little lower. Normally not my style, but I am going to be working more on my novel that I started during NaNoWriMo this year, and so I don't want to set my reading goal so high that it's unattainable. Hopefully I will surpass the goal. I'm thinking maybe set it to like 30 books for next year because I will be doing a lot of writing and spending time on that. But I don't want to slow down my reading too much, so I'm thinking maybe 30 to 40 books is what I'll end up reading next year. We'll find out. So without further ado, let's get into the December wrap-up. First I'll go over the fiction and then a couple of nonfiction books at the end. First up is Illuminae. I have spoken about this in a few other videos, and I absolutely adore this book. I loved it. I read through it so fast. I think it took me like 2 or 3 days, 2 or 3 sittings rather, to get through this. You've probably heard about this all over BookTube already, but I will just say that if you are apprehensive at all about the style of this book, it is written in a very odd format of text messages and emails and documents that were collected after certain events that happen in the space saga, and I just love this. I don't read a lot of sci-fi, but this was just nearly perfect in my book. I really liked the multiple point of views and the action and the story. I think that there's actually a lot to be gained by the way this story was told. And like I said, if you're apprehensive at all and think that it might be a little weird or just hard to get into, in my opinion, it's not. It didn't take me very long to get into it at all, and I just loved it. And I can't wait to read the second one, called Gemina. Next, I read Archivist Wasp by Nicole Korner-Stace. This is a slim novel, well, about 260 something pages, and I don't remember how I found this. Maybe I was browsing on Goodreads or something, and then I looked it up on Amazon. I haven't heard a lot of people talking about this book, so I was really curious because it is basically about a ghost hunter. Well, she archives the memories and the stories of ghosts, and so Wasp is the main character's name, and she is the archivist in this society. It is a post-apocalyptic world that this is set in, and she ends up journeying kind of through the underworld with one of the ghosts that she meets, and goes on this long task to retrieve something. And I'm not going to say much more than that, but I felt that this was really well written, and it's not spooky. It's kind of eerie in some ways. I wouldn't call it scary. I also really appreciated that this book, well, it's supposed to be a YA book, but it didn't really use the crutch of most other YA books, which is romance. And this was not a tale of love. I mean, it was in a very distant way, but like there was no romance in this book. And I found it a very refreshing read, that it was so engaging and that there wasn't some sort of, a love story driving it. Definitely 5 out of 5 stars. Next, I've been meaning to read this for a long time, and because I needed to meet that goal for Goodreads to get 45 books in, this was the extra book that I slipped in order to meet my goal. Originally I was planning on reading one of the Outlander books this month, but I was like, I'm never gonna meet my goal if I read that huge thing. So I did several smaller books instead. This is by Brian and Wendy Froud. This is the Pressed Fairy Journal of Madeline, Cottington, and it's just a wonderful book. I'm a huge fan of Brian Froud and Wendy Froud. This one came out this September, and kind of like a modern redone version of the Pressed Fairy Journal, which they have done in the past. And as you can see, there's all these journal entries and little images of squashed fairies, which are so lovely to look over as you're reading. I loved this story. I think that the fresh perspective from Madeline Cottington was just what this book needed, and my only gripe is that it wasn't longer. I really got interested in the story and I wanted it to be more than 100 pages. Next, I read The Invisible Library by Genevieve Cogman. This one, I was interested in it once I read the little blip on the back when I was in a bookstore this summer, and I put it on my to-read list. And honestly, I am someone who will often buy things because of the cover. This one, unfortunately, though it's beautifully simple, I just wasn't like intrigued enough to pick it up right away. But I'm really glad that I read this, and I can't wait to get to the next ones in the series. This is a sort of, I did find it a little confusing through like the first third of the book perhaps, but I was intrigued enough to keep reading, and now I'm just fully invested in this world, or worlds I should say, because there are many in this. Basically this is about a librarian who, and that is not as boring as it sounds, she is sort of a librarian spy. This book has the vibe of like Sherlock Holmes and murder mystery all throughout, and so this librarian, the main character Irene, is sort of a librarian spy, and her job with the library with a capital L is to retrieve books from alternate worlds and realms and bring them back to the library, which exists in between realms. And I won't say more than that because I don't want to spoil it, but I cannot wait to get to the next one. And the third one is out January 10th, I believe, so I want to read those next, first thing in January. I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. Lastly, a couple of nonfiction reads. I mentioned this in a couple of other videos too, as well as in my book gift guide that I did on this channel, and this is Bloom Navigating Life and Style by Estee Lalonde, one of my favorite YouTubers and bloggers out there for the beauty and lifestyle category. I just love her personality and loved reading a little bit more about her. You learn things in here that she doesn't necessarily share on her channel, and there's a lot of lovely photos throughout, and it's sort of a memoir mixed up with how-to and style tips, and there are even a few recipes in the back. Really enjoyed it and would highly recommend it if you are interested in her at all. I read a memoir, although she says it's not quite a memoir, Wildflower by Barrymore, one of my favorite actresses, and I had to read more about her life. I have to say, I gave this like a 3-star rating. It wasn't the most eloquent thing I've ever read, but that's not really why I read it. You know, I wasn't going into it expecting it to be the most beautifully written memoir ever. This was a collection of essays and little snapshots of her life, and they're not in chronological order. So I found that a little disorienting, but again, that's kind of Drew's style. So I really enjoyed learning more about her and her time on movie sets, especially when she was a child. And yeah, it was fun and fresh, and I love this cover. I found her to be, of course, very funny. Her writing style was a bit choppy for me at times, but I mean, like I said, I was reading it to learn more about this woman, and yeah, it was a fun read. The last book that I'm trying to squeeze in before the end of the year in this last half a day that I have left is The Writer's Journey, Mythic Structure for Writers, the 3rd edition by Kristoff Vogler. And I have been sort of working my way through this for the last 6 months or more, and I figure since I was already halfway through that it's something I could finish before the end of the year. I have maybe 100 pages left, so I'm gonna try to get through that this afternoon as soon as I finish this video, and then make my goal for the end of the year. I have found this to be very helpful so far to take a look at story structure, character archetypes, the way that certain stories can be structured, and I'm using this more of just like as a guideline and an idea whenever I get stuck, not as like an absolute roadmap. And as the author says inside, it's not meant to be, you know, used concretely necessarily. It's to kind of like learn the structure and then break it. In fact, he says, it's probably best to acquaint yourself with the hero's journey ideas and then forget about them as you sit down to write. So I am getting a lot out of this and underlining things and taking some notes. It's helping me to ask some questions about the characters that I'm writing that I hadn't necessarily thought about before. So a good handbook to have, you know, at your desk, but I think he's right. Like, you kind of have to learn and study the structure and then put this away so that you can just write unhindered. All right, so those are the books that I read in December, and yeah, I can't believe that the year is almost over. It's almost 2017. I'm really excited for 2017, I have to say, and I have a lot of exciting things planned for this year, some big goals. I'm really excited to continue making videos for you guys in 2017 also, about books and writing, and a few about natural beauty also. So subscribe if you want to see those in the new year. I hope you all have a wonderful New Year's Eve, don't drink and drive, and have a very happy new year. I will see you all in my next video. Bye!